Hi, and welcome to another prayer meeting with Cottondale as we pray together online through the book of Daniel. And so we took a break last week because of Thanksgiving, and now we're back, and it has gotten really cold, and I'm wearing my jacket in my office. and But I'm looking forward to walking through and looking through Daniel. This evening, we're going to be in chapter 3, and it's a very famous chapter, and I think just an incredible story. It's one of the most famous stories in the Bible, and I think for good reason. And I think we as believers have a lot of hope that we can take from the story in Daniel chapter 3. And so, as we have been doing, I'd like you to, if you haven't done so or read it recently, I'd like for you to just go ahead and pause the video and read through Daniel chapter 3 and just kind of refamiliarize yourself with it quickly. Maybe if you're with some family or something watching this, maybe just one of you read it out loud or take turns and read it together. And just read the scripture together, Daniel chapter 3, and pick back up with me when you're done. All right, so hopefully you read Daniel chapter 3 there, and we're going to jump right into the text. And so you're now familiar with the story and giant statue that Nebuchadnezzar is commanding everyone to worship. And of course, that causes a big problem for Daniel and his friends, which Daniel is not mentioned in this story. We're not sure how this played out for him. But his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were all here, and were all being commanded to bow down to the statue, which, as we all know, was clearly forbidden to the Jews, because they knew what the truth was, that there was only one God, and that they were forbidden to make an image of that God, like all the other nations made idols or images, statues of their gods that they bowed down to. And God, the God of Israel, commanded them not to make an image or a statue, even try to make one of Him, because no physical thing can accurately or come even close to representing who God is. He is the invisible God, and so and the only image that we get of God is one that He Himself gives us. That is, Jesus was called the image of the invisible God. And so that's another sermon. But they refused to bow down to this statue. And of course, Nebuchadnezzar said that if people did not obey this command to bow down to this statue and worship it, they would be thrown into the fiery furnace. And so the friends refuse, and they are required to come before him. And Nebuchadnezzar, actually gives them one more chance. Maybe he liked them a little bit, but he gives them one more chance, and still they refuse. And this is what they say. He says, "Now, if you're ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" Well, that's a good question, isn't it? And Nebuchadnezzar's kind of setting himself up. He's arrogant. He's prideful. He's boastful. He thinks that he's in charge, not realizing that God's in charge, right? So how do Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego respond? It says they answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and He will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." And so, I really want to focus on their Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's response here. Notice their response. They have already. Now, I want you to think about this. Now, maybe in some ways they kind of had an advantage, or maybe it was a disadvantage. I don't know, but surely they knew that this was coming. They were officials, okay, in the kingdom, okay. I'm sure they knew this statue was being built. I'm sure they knew. Turn my air off there. I'm sure they knew that, this day was coming. And my guess is, I bet they probably knew that this command was coming, that everyone who did not bow down and worship the statue would be killed. And so they probably had at least a little bit of time to think about this. And I just want you to put yourself in their shoes, okay? You're not Babylonian, you're from another land, okay? You've been taken captive. You now work for the king. Okay, he's your boss, but in a supreme sense, he's the king. Okay, this is coming. This is coming. What you gonna do? What you gonna do? I imagine maybe that these got together and thought about what they were going to do. And this is what they decided to do. They said, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter." So think about what that communicates right there. Their mind was already made up, right? There was nothing to say, right? When somebody commands us to do something that God forbids, there's nothing to really say about it, right? We have nothing else to say. God says no. That's all there is to it, right? We don't have to, we don't have to explain ourselves. We don't have to give a reason. I mean, sometimes those things are good, and sometimes we want to help people understand our perspective, and that's good. But at the end of the day, if somebody's trying to force us to do something that God forbids, we don't have to give an answer. We just say no. God forbids it, and we won't do it because we trust Him and believe in Him. They have no need to answer Him in this manner. That takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of gusto. These three men standing up to King Nebuchadnezzar like that, and he didn't like that, by the way. He wasn't used to being stood up to. Okay, but he says, if this be so, if this is going to happen, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us. See, Nebuchadnezzar had said, right? He said, Who will deliver you out of my hands? And they says, well, I'll tell you who. Our God whom we serve is able to deliver us. God can do it. He can deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and He will deliver us, O King. But then notice the next part there. But he says, but if not, be it known to you that we will not serve your God. So notice what they're saying here. I think this is a great lesson for us concerning our faith about things that we don't always know how they're going to work out. In some cases, right? In some cases, in life, like in the New Testament, for example, the apostles and stuff, they would go and they would heal people, right, after Jesus, in the book of Acts or something, and they knew what God was going to do through them. I don't know, maybe they just had a spiritual sense, or maybe just God confirmed it in their spirits. I don't know, but like they knew that if something was going to happen, they could heal, okay? But often in life, there's situations where we don't know what's gonna happen. We don't have any kind of special supernatural sense or divine sense about anything. We don't know exactly how it's going to work out, and we don't know. And on some matters, we don't know what God's will is. Right? We know God tells us not to worship idols, right? So we know that's God's will, is for us not to worship idols, right? But is it God's will for us to move here or go there, or take this job, or whatever the situation may be? Some of these things, God has no clear direction on it. And in that sense, we don't necessarily know exactly if it's God's will or not. Or in another case, maybe someone is sick, and we know that God can heal them, but we don't know if God will heal them. We know that he can, but we don't always know if he will. Well, this is what I love about this story right here, is their response. We know that God is able. We know that God is able, but we don't necessarily know that he's going to. But this is the key, right? But even if he doesn't save us from your hand, Nebuchadnezzar, be it known that we're still not going to worship that image that you set up. In other words, God can deliver us, and maybe he will, and maybe he won't. But guess what? Even if he doesn't, I'm still not going to disobey him. And so, what is that? I mean, it's courage, right? It's faith, right? It's loyalty to God, right? It's saying God is more valuable to me than my life. And so if it comes between choosing him and choosing my life, I'm choosing God every time. And that was a measured decision that he had to make, and that they had to make. And it makes us, it kind of presses on us the same question, doesn't it? And so, how can we pray about this? Well, pray for strength and courage to take a stand for Christ and for the truth. Settle in your heart now what you will do if forced to choose between Christ and anything else. Like I said, my guess is it didn't totally take them off guard. They had time to think about it, and that's a blessing, right? That's a blessing, because we can imagine an instance where we might not have time to think about it. You're just forced to choose. So it's good when you're not in the heat of the moment to become to a settled conviction in your heart, so that if and when the moment comes, you already know what you're going to do, because we know what the right thing to do is. The right thing is to stand for Christ, right? And the truth is, and we think, well, this will never happen. Well, what happened to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will never happen to us. But I just want to say, man, I don't know. In other parts of the world right now, people are literally choosing between their life and Jesus Christ right today in other parts of the world. And if you don't think religious liberty is under threat, even right here in the United States of America, you're not really paying attention to what's going on. And I don't think someone's going to try to kill us anytime soon. But I'm just saying, following Christ has been costly in every generation, and I think the writing's on the wall that it will become costlier in our generation. How much costlier, I don't know. But the truth is following Christ nowadays, it doesn't really get you brownie points. Most of the time it goes in the opposite direction if we really take a stand for what the Bible teaches, especially about things like gender and sexuality and stuff like that. Very hot cultural points right now. And so we have to decide in our heart what we're going to do if we're forced to choose. And I say choose Christ. And we have to decide in our heart to do that right now. So pray for strength and courage to take that stand. And then pray for your church. If you're a member of Cottondale, pray for Cottondale or in your local church. And then pray for the church, capital C. Pray that God would help those suffering right now for the name. I talk about it all the time, but it's just so important to remember our brothers and sisters who are suffering in other parts of the world. There's some great ministries that you can read more about the ways in which brothers and sisters in Christ are suffering. Voice of the Martyrs is a ministry, or Open Doors is a ministry. You can Google both of those and find more information. And just read about what's happening in other parts of the world, and, enlarge your perspective a little bit, and allow God, to just work in your heart and just develop a heart of compassion for our brothers and sisters who are suffering. And let their strength and their courage strengthen us when our time for suffering comes. So why not take some time, go ahead and hit the pause button, kind of pray through these things, and pick back up with me when you're done. All right, so Nebuchadnezzar, he didn't like that answer that he got, and so he threw them in the fiery furnace. He ordered that it be made 7 times hotter than usual. It was so hot that even the people who threw the men into the fire were killed from the heat, as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fell into the burning fiery furnace. And as he's watching them in the furnace, it says that King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." And he answered and said, "But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they're not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." Don't you just love that? The men fall bound into the fiery furnace, and Nebuchadnezzar is looking there. And as he's looking there, he sees the men, and they're not being consumed. They're not even in pain. They're not crying out. They're not in agony. They're walking around. And not only that, not only are they just walking around, they threw 3 men into the fire. But as he looks through the flames, he sees 4 men in the fire. And this is incredible. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. You know, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, God is able to deliver us. He will deliver us. But even if he doesn't, we'll not worship your gods or bow down to that statue. And so they believed. They trusted. They showed that God was more valuable to them than their lives. And God, in his mercy, again, he didn't have to do this, but he did. He chose to in his mercy. He delivered them. He saved them. They fell into the fire, and he preserved them in a special way by this 4th person there, right? This 4th person who is like a son of the gods. Now what in the world is that? Well, it could just be an angel. Okay, angels are some places in the Bible called sons of God. Okay, so it could just be an angel. Some people, of course, have speculated that this would be the pre-incarnate, the pre-incarnate Christ. Okay, or the pre-incarnate Jesus. Jesus before he, became Jesus, born of a virgin. The Son of God, pre-incarnate in pre-incarnate form. Okay, I guess we just don't. I guess we don't know for sure. But maybe it was. Maybe it was. In my children's storybook Bible, one of their storybook Bibles, in the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which of course is in there, it has this story, and it has the men in the flames there, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and then it has the picture of the 4th one. And of course the picture is very vague, but if you look in the storybook Bible at that 4th character in the picture, and then you go forward in the Bible to the time of Jesus, you can see they used the same drawing, right? So the artist clearly thought that it was Jesus, the pre-incarnate Jesus, because it was the same picture, the same person, same character. So what we do know for sure is that God was with them in the flames, and he preserved them through the flames. And I just want to say, and you know this already, that God, whatever fire he's going to call you through, he's going to be with you in it, right? Their call was to endure the flames, right? So think about that. The right decision for them to make was to go through the flames. God's will, we could say, God's will for them was not to, we know it wasn't to worship idols, right? So God's will for them was to enter into the flames. But God preserved them through the flames, right? And we know, we're going to talk about a little bit later, because they entered into the flames, that created an opportunity for God to preserve them through the flames. And then that ended in what? God's name being honored and being glorified. And so we know that sometimes the faithfulness to Christ will cause suffering in our lives. But that suffering then isn't ultimately to hurt us, it's to glorify God. And whatever suffering God calls us to out of an act of faith and obedience to Him, He's going to walk into the flames and stand by us in the midst of it. And so I think that it's comforting, right? And so maybe just take some time this evening and reflect on a time when God stood with you. I meant to say, when God stood with you in the fire. I bet you can think about a season in your life right now that was so hard, but God got you through it. And maybe it's been a little while since you thought about it. Why not take some time and say, God, thank you, and reflect on that, and just let that memory remind you of His faithfulness in your life, that how He's done it for you before, He will do it again. And also, and maybe you or someone you know is suffering right now. Maybe that time wasn't just in the past, but maybe you're personally going through something right now. If not, I'm sure you know somebody who is really going through it right now. And so what a great time we have right now as God brings maybe certain individuals to mind, maybe a few people who are just going through just an unusually difficult time right now. What a great time as God brings them to mind to just pray for them, that God would help them and preserve and strengthen them and uphold them and give them the comfort to know that He is walking with them. And maybe you could even give them a call or shoot them a text or something to let them know that you're praying for them and that God is with them. I bet that'll be a real blessing to them. And so go ahead and hit the pause button and kind of pray through these things and pick back up with me when you're done. All right, we're going to look at this last passage here. And this is towards the end of the chapter there, and it's Nebuchadnezzar's response after he sees the four people there, and they come out of the flames, and and it says that their clothes didn't even smell like smoke. Right? It's amazing. It says, Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and set aside the king's command, and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way." And so, granted, Nebuchadnezzar was pretty infuriated by their insubordination, we might say. When he sees how all this plays out, he quickly changes his tune, because we'll at least give Nebuchadnezzar this. He knew power at work when he saw it. The Lord had to humble him later, turn him into a beast. We'll talk about that. But he knew God's power when he saw it. And when this happened, he said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego." So he recognized that God had just worked in spite of him, And so he really's got nothing left to do except to bless God for it. And who has sent his angel to deliver his servants and trusted in him. And he even, basically, he praises the men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because of their willingness to set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than to worship and serve and worship any god except their own God. Even an unbeliever can recognize the goodness of genuine conviction when they see it. Nebuchadnezzar might not have believed everything that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego believed, but he did recognize conviction and loyalty and faith when he saw it. And he saw that their willingness to yield up their bodies to death rather than to worship any other god was conviction worthy of praise, even though he didn't truly, fully even understand who God was. He knew that whatever, in his mind, whatever God could do that is worthy of blessing and praise. And so what we see is that, as I mentioned earlier, their faith and their courage and their conviction and their willingness to lay their lives down for God's sake ended up doing what? Well, it ended up having Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful man in the world, probably at this time, praising the name of the Lord, glorifying God, right? Because of this situation, because of this hardship and difficulty that they willingly chose to endure for the sake of the Lord. And in fact, he makes a decree that anyone who speaks against the God of Israel will be torn limb from limb and their house is laid in ruins, because no other God's able to do that. And so I think what's important to remember is that when we suffer for God's name, the temptation is to, honestly, right? If we're honest about it, the temptation is to complain about it, and maybe even say, well, God, I've trusted you and I've done this and I've done that, and now look what's happened to me, right? That the Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego could probably have said that, God, I've trusted you, and now look, where this has got me. I'm about to be thrown into a fiery furnace, right? And they could have complained about it, but they didn't. They saw it as an opportunity. They saw the trial as an opportunity to show their faith in God and to show the value and worth of God by their willingness to cling to their faith rather than to deny Him. And so, what if our sufferings and the trials that we face are not not punishment, not God getting back at us, but what if they're opportunities God is giving us? God is giving us an opportunity to show the world how great God is when we suffer in faith, when we suffer in willingness, when we say, I may be going through this, but I'm not denying my God. And people will see that, and Nebuchadnezzar saw that and said, blessed be God, who these men, how do you put it? They yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any other God. And so, suffering is an opportunity to honor and glorify Christ. And nothing, I think, tells the world the worth and the value and the beauty of Christ than when His people willingly, joyfully, gladly suffer for His name. See, anyone can worship a God who does nothing but bless you. But when you worship Him and treasure Him and love Him and cling to Him, even when things are just utterly terrible, that's supernatural. That's something the world could not explain. That is what tells the world that God is greater than life itself. And that's when they'll truly glorify Him and see Him as He is. Okay, so some prayer points here. Oops. Let's see here. Okay, got it. Pray that the lost world would see the glory of Christ through our willingness to suffer for His name. We should pray for this. We should pray for this. It doesn't come naturally, right? This isn't natural. What is it? It's supernatural. It comes from divine grace. It comes from knowing what God has done for you. And just treasuring that above everything else. And so and this does happen and it is happening, and it will happen. And so pray that when it does, God would see the glory of Christ through our willingness to suffer for his name. And then finally, pray that others might come to know him as a result of our witness. There's story after story after story about people coming to know Christ because of a believer suffering boldly and courageously for him. There's all kinds of stories in the early church when during seasons of persecution, when the Roman government at times in different places would round up believers and put them in the Colosseum and the games, and the pagan Romans would sit there and pay money and cheer to see Christians eaten alive by wild beasts, and that really happened. And there's testimony and witness that many of them died with smiles on their faces and joy in their hearts, singing hymns of praise to God, and it had a profound effect on a number of people, many of whom came to Christ themselves when they saw the way that Christians died. And so that might not happen to us. It might be unlikely at present that anything like that could ever happen to us, but maybe it's a different kind of suffering. Maybe it's a disease or a sickness or a difficult family situation, or maybe in the future, people, it's conceivable you might lose your job because of the stance that you take on certain things, or lose your business or something like that. I mean, these are conceivable things, okay? But when we suffer for him, we're not going to get mad about it. We count it a joy to suffer for the name, and when we do, that tells the world that there is something greater than life, greater than a job, greater than whatever. It's God. And when they see that, God will use that others might come to know him. And so pray that he would. So kind of walk through these things and pray through them and pick back up with me when you're done. All right. I hope you had a good evening kind of thinking about some of these things and spending it in prayer to the Lord. I love the book of Daniel. I love these stories. I look forward to doing it a little bit longer with you. And so it's been a good evening. I hope that you have a great rest of the week. If there's something that you need or something we can do for you, something we can be praying for you about, please don't hesitate to let us know. And I hope to see you this Sunday at 9:30 as we worship King Jesus. Have a great week. God bless you.